Hi. Hi.
Uh, Hello.
Okay, so let's
Okay.
talk about well, I guess we can just talk about your American history paper first. Well, no, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one.
Yes.
This is your Kim Eugene.
Foreign. Yeah.
Okay, Kim
Foreign
Eugene.
policy.
You are looking at the. Let me see which one is that. Kim Eugene is U.S. foreign policy. Sorry, U.S. foreign policy. And let me find your foreign policy class here paper. And where is U.S. foreign policy? There's that, that, and okay, there it is. So let me do that and go back to this and go share screen and go here. I think that's it there. And there you see your U.S. foreign policy paper. So let me remind myself what I wrote here, and let me save it again in case I make some more changes to it. And okay, so we go with this and that, okay. And so the rise of Donald Trump, let me remind myself what I wrote here. Okay, okay. And all right, so the rise of Donald Trump to election as U.S. president was a consequence of the overextension foreign policy commitments and the indifference of actors about foreign policy. So, I say a paragraph should have at least 2 sentences. So you can just, combine these like that. Okay. So after the Cold War, the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 put the United States in a position of global primacy with no competitors. Yay! Emphasizing democratization, economic globalization, multilateral cooperation. Clinton believed that the United States would be more secure and prosperous in a more tightly knit world. Yay! Such as a democratic peace, sharing common values, interests, and political institutions seem to make interaction between countries more intimate, while discouraging challenges to the status quo. Okay. Okay. So why do you think only now, since Trump, basically in the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, there's now been this big focus on China? Why didn't Clinton worry about China? Why didn't Obama or George W. Bush emphasize more the problems with China? Why has it emerged now as an issue for the United States?
Well, I think now is the time that China is showing its real power, because I heard that from 2001, when the China became one of the WTO country, that influenced the power of the economic power about the global economy. So
yeah, I mean, then okay, go on.
So I think personally, since 2001 is one of the the highlight of the China's world influence. Yeah. So Clinton was not. So Clinton didn't really expect that China is going to be this big, and I think Obama, he also, he expected, but it became too big for now. I think China became too big for now.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. The September 11, 2001 attacks really shifted America's attention away from China. There were conflicts. Like there was a case where I remember, like 2 days or 3 days before the September 11, 2001 attacks, or maybe a little bit earlier than that, but right before the attacks, there was an American spy plane was flying off the coast of China, and a Chinese fighter jet flew up to it and touched it, and it caused the fighter jet to crash and kill the pilot, but damaged the American airplane, and the American airplane had to land on the island of Hainan. And it was held there for it was 2 weeks before the September 11, 2001 attacks. So there was and then September 11, 2001 attacks happened. And then, America invaded Afghanistan and then Iraq, and George W. Bush is describing Saddam Hussein's Iraq and the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Taliban and Kim Jong-il of North Korea and as all part of the axis of evil, right? And so he gets reelected in 2004, even though they didn't find any weapons of mass destruction, which was the argument that he made for why America had to invade Iraq, because Saddam Hussein was going to give nuclear bombs to people like Osama bin Laden and use them to attack America or America's friends. And of course, they then invaded Iraq and found out there were no weapons of mass destruction there. And this all came up again because the person who gave that speech before the United Nations that claimed that Saddam Hussein was developing these weapons and calling upon the world to support the United States was Colin Powell. And he just died like 2 days ago. He was the Secretary of State for George W. Bush. And then, of course, Obama gets elected in 2008, and he starts figuring out how to reduce America's involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan, or how to deal with the problems that reduce involvement in Iraq. But then he starts talking about a pivot to Asia. And also at this time, we started seeing Chinese begin to move to build military bases on those islands in the South China Sea, artificial islands, although they claimed they weren't the first to do that, to claim military installations on those islands, that it was rather the Philippines and the Vietnamese were doing it years before. They just got lots of money and capabilities, more so than the Filipinos and the Vietnamese, to do it big instead of the small way that the Filipinos did it. But then, of course, there's the election in 2016 to the surprise of many that Donald Trump won. And the big focus of Donald Trump's campaign, his rhetorical campaign, was China. That China was, and not just China, but South Korea, Europe, all these countries are taking advantage of America, particularly by selling their products in America, their exports in America, and taking away American jobs from American workers, because American companies could not compete against the state government-supported industries of China, in particular. That China cheats. That China directs lots of money through its communist system, controlling the banks, and although it's still, fundamentally based upon capitalism and interaction with the world economy, the Chinese flood their industries with cheap subsidies, and until they can put all of their international competitors out of business with their cheap products. And then, of course, the Chinese can reap all the benefits because they don't have competition. I remember, I was just thinking about this today. I remember when I was a small child, when the oil prices were going really high, and there was the oil crisis in the 1970s, and people were saying, I wish we had solar power and solar power cells, and they were so expensive in the 1970s. The word I remember reading that they said the number of cells, the cost of the solar power panels necessary to power a toaster to toast bread would cost tens of thousands of dollars to generate the amount of electricity. And then, of course, China floods the world with solar power panels. They're everywhere, and they're cheap. And they put American solar power manufacturers out of business through that pot. Like Solyndra was one of these American companies. They couldn't compete with the Chinese solar power companies. So most of the solar power panels are made in China, and they're really cheap, and that's good for a whole world because we need solar energy, right? Solar generated electricity. And that's what China says. Hey, man, we're saving the world through our model, right? Now all of a sudden solar power is cheap. And thank you very much, world. Thank you, the Communist Party of China. But of course, so now Donald Trump succeeded in winning the election. So, and I'm not certain he even expected to win, but he won, and barely. Hillary Clinton got almost 3 million or 4 million more votes than he did, but because of the American political system way it's set up, Donald Trump still won because he won the Electoral College state by state count. And so he won on that. And so, of course, he had to fulfill his promises on that he's going to reduce the Chinese exports to the United States. And he begins the trade war, which is still in place. The Joe Biden cannot easily politically reverse that, because he's always concerned, like most American or most politicians in democracies, with the next elections, which will happen in 13 months for Congress, in 13 months next November, and then the next presidential elections in 2024. And that's how Donald Trump and China became an issue. But look at this right now. We're having this class in English. I'm an American professor. This is an American style university. Why don't you think American power? You make the point here that Hook highlights how America is unparalleled in its influence and power around the world, right? Why don't Americans like that? Why are not more American? Let's put this: why do not more Americans love the fact that American globalization, American-led liberalization, American-led globalization through promoting its open international trade, encouraging its allies and friends to export to the United States, and allowing American companies to invest in China and in Europe and Japan, and then China beginning in the 1970s and 80s. You can see the result. Everybody wants to study English. Hundreds of millions of people want to study English in China. You can see American culture, American music. Everybody borrows American popular musical fashion and culture styles. Why don't more Americans? Why did Trump win 2016 election?
Well, I think that's it's true that America likes to people likes to influence the cultural power and its mightiness, but when it comes to the political issue and the domestic issue, I think they would like to prefer I think it is more important to focus on the domestic issue first.
So you think many Americans, not all, for example, I like globalization. I got my job here because of American-led globalization, but there are many Americans who feel like they are not benefiting from American-led globalization that America encouraged after the Second World War as part of containment of the Soviet Union. Americans didn't do this just because they wanted to spread democracy and make money. Their motivation was to contain what they perceived was the prevailing view in Washington, not the only view, but the dominant view. The Soviet Union basically was trying to do what Hitler's Germany tried to do. The Soviet Union was a Russian version of Nazi Germany. Joseph Stalin was the Russian Soviet version of Hitler. And we have to strengthen our allies and friends, get their economies growing, get their economies strong, to help them build up their military, send the American military around the world with many military bases, because we have to contain the Soviet Union. Because if we don't, they will take over Asia, Europe, and then the world. And so, but the Soviet Union is gone. The Soviet Union disintegrated 30 years ago. That's 3 decades ago. And for many Americans, this emphasis on international affairs, they were persuaded, not all of them, but they were the prevailing view that dominated American thinking was that, we have to do this because the Soviet Union is evil and it wants to expand. And so we have to be involved, but, we don't want to make mistakes. And, Vietnam was a mistake because it was done. The dominant view was that it was incompetence, that the American political leadership was incompetent. It wasn't because the war fundamentally was a mistake, or the assumption about communism being a global conspiracy spread from Moscow was wrong. It was that we didn't do it right. That became the dominant view, that we had an incompetent president, and that was Lyndon Johnson. And the Democrats under Lyndon Johnson made mistakes, and then of course and of course when people say, well, let's look what happened. I mean, after the Americans left Vietnam in 1973, the South Vietnam collapsed. So Vietnam was now one country under the communists, and Cambodia became communist, and Laos became communist. And then communist Vietnam invaded communist Cambodia. And they put Hun Sen in power, and he's still there. And then China, which was an ally of communist Cambodia, punished Vietnam by attacking Vietnam and invading Vietnam in the north. And communist China attacked communist Vietnam. And then the communist Soviet Union threatened China. If it didn't stop, it would attack China. Communist Soviet Union threatening communist China. So where's this global communist conspiracy that was the justification for going into that war in Vietnam? And what those people that defend Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan and those people that claim that we did win the Cold War was that, well, it was because of America's involvement in Southeast Asia and Richard Nixon's and Henry Kissinger's skill that we were able to break up the communist empire. It was our efforts, even though we made mistakes, that put so much stress and strain on the communist empire that it began to break up, even though there were still communist governments in Vietnam. There's still one there today, and they're close allies with the United States. And there's a communist party in power in China, and there's, but it was because it was still going on, and we caused that break. And then we finally ended up making China become an ally of the United States, even though it was a communist party still. But the Soviet Union was more of the problem because China was weak and poor, and the Soviet Union had thousands of nuclear weapons, and lots of tens of thousands of soldiers on the border with Western Europe, maybe preparing to invade West Germany and all of West Europe. And I mean, this is the kind of world I grew up in, right? But of course, and so Americans believe that, and then the Soviet Union disintegrates, and war begins in Iraq when Iraq invades Kuwait. Saddam Hussein decides he's going to become the Kim Jong-un, Kim Il-sung of the Arabs, and unify all the Arabs that were divided by outside powers in one state under his dictatorship. And like Otto von Bismarck with the Germans 140 years ago, and 150 years ago, and then George H.W. Bush, who was the vice president of Ronald Reagan, declares that we must oppose this Saddam Hussein because he's so dangerous. And the American people said, oh, okay, yeah, let's go to war against Saddam Hussein, this little Hitler. And then America wins the war, destroys Iraq, and with little cost to America. And George H.W. Bush is really popular. I mean, he had over 90% public opinion approval ratings, according to the surveys at the time, over 90%. And this is in the spring of 1991 when the war is finished. I think it was like March or April, it was done. And then 14, 15, 16 months later, he loses election to Bill Clinton. He loses in re-election effort to Bill Clinton in November 1992. And it showed that the American people, many American people, not all, not George H.W. Bush, not the people that love George H.W. Bush or Ronald Reagan, but many American people say, hey, this is enough of this. We have a weak economy. Why are we still involved in wars around the world when the Soviet Union's gone?
Yes.
And so, but there's still a big segment, obviously, of American society that likes being involved around the world, including me and all of the military people and all the suppliers to the military. And so Bill Clinton doesn't really withdraw American forces. He does still, because like any politician, he's always focused on the elections, election, getting reelected. And he knows, even though the Americans don't want to be involved in any hostile, direct military conflicts that can kill American soldiers, they also do not want to be losers. So he, for example, bombs Serbia in 1999 over the way they're treating the Albanians in Kosovo. But he's very careful just to use Air Force power to drop bombs from way up in the sky because the Serbs couldn't stop it. Couldn't stop that. They couldn't shoot down those planes. No American soldiers on the ground, fighting on the ground. Of course, they use the Albanians, the Albanian guerrilla fighters to be basically their infantry. And Americans, yeah, okay, yeah, we're still cool, we're winners. And then Clinton leaves office and George W. Bush, the son of George H.W. Bush, replaces George W. Becomes president. And, he's sort of doing the same thing. And then the September 11, 2001 attacks happen. And that was easy to mobilize the Americans for those wars to invade Afghanistan and Iraq. And it worked because we were attacked. It was a horrible experience to watch. And but the war the war wasn't supposed to last this long. So you saw what happens. They were there for 20 years, and Americans could not impose their will without violence, without using the military to occupy the country. And so Donald Trump exploited all of that. And when he was running for president in 2016, we were spending all of this money and on wars, and it's a waste. But even he had to be careful because he knows that people, like we talked about in class, people are inconsistent in their thinking and in their desires, and they often are inconsistent, and they themselves don't understand themselves very well, and they don't understand this inconsistency. But even though they don't want to be involved in all these wars, they also don't want to they don't want their country to be embarrassed. And the way America left Kabul in August a couple months ago was embarrassing. And so Joe Biden President Joe Biden is in trouble because even though he also understands that Americans want to have more resources focused generally on American problems, at the same time, his enemies and adversaries inside the United States are claiming that he's basically like Jimmy Carter. He's a foolish, bumbling president who embarrassed the country in America, in Afghanistan, and there are and all of this, including all those people that want and he's not touching the defense budget. He didn't want to increase the defense budget, but the Congress, the democratically controlled Congress, actually added more money to the U.S. defense budget, because even though Americans say we don't want to spend all this money on international affairs, still a big part of the American economy depends upon the military after all of these years to supply the military. Like I read in that article I showed you from 2017, like 10% of the U.S. manufacturing capacity is focused on supplying the military. 10%. Lots of American military bases employ lots of people that work on those bases all over the United States. So but at the same time, I mean, America in the 1960s, the United States was competing with the Soviet Union. So it was trying to be appealing to you and to everybody around the world. So it wanted to be liberal. It wanted to be open. It wanted to be a free trade state. It wanted to encourage migration. So the Americans encouraged migration by changing their migration laws to bring in more Koreans and Filipinos and other people. Asian Americans really flooded into the United States after U.S. immigration laws were changed in the 1960s. That's all part of this effort to compete with the Soviet Union for the hearts and minds of Koreans, Vietnamese, Africans, Asians, Europeans, everybody, and not be racist, because the Soviet Union is saying America's a racist country. Look how they treat their Black people. Look at how they're evil, racist, capitalist system. Communism is better. Communism fights racism better. But of course, the consequence was that America became a much more diverse place. And of course, if you and you might benefit from this American liberal order, but you have to have a college degree, a 4-year college degree, and ideally speak another language well. Like you speak English, your future is so good for you. I mean, you speak English, you're going to have a 4-year degree, I mean, South Korea is all about how to be successful. You have to study, you have to be an expert, and you have to speak a foreign language. And if you do, you're going to get a good job and live well, maybe better than your parents even. But for Americans, still only like 2/3 of American adults do not have a 4-year degree, not to mention speak a foreign language. And all of those kinds of jobs that paid relatively well for people that didn't have a college degree, those are gone. If you don't have a college degree, you're likely going to have to work at McDonald's or Dunkin' Donuts or Walmart
Yeah.
or Costco. That's it. You're not going to live as well as other Americans, that about 1/3 of the population of America that loves globalization. Right? And Donald Trump appealed to those people in their grievances. That America is and that's how, because we have to conclude here. Do you have any questions?
Oh, yeah, actually, one thing at the downside part, I saw a word called, what was it called? White grievance. White grievance.
Yeah.
I don't really know
White
what
grievance. Yeah.
that means.
That
Can
means,
you-
I mean, the white majority people in the United States see America becoming more and more diverse, with people coming from Asia and Africa and becoming and getting good jobs, because typically, the Koreans that come over to the United States, they become doctors and lawyers, and their children study and go to Harvard. And for those, it's those white working class people that do not have college degrees that really support Trump. They're the core of Trump's support.
Yeah, now
Okay.
I get it.
White grievance. Yeah. Okay, we're going to have to stop there because I have another student coming in a minute. So,
Yes.
all right, so I'll send you the paper again if I made any changes to it. I don't think I've made any changes, but I'll send you the link to this video recording later in the afternoon, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.